You can connect me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So my name is Xiaodi. I'm the organizer of .NET user group. I'm Microsoft MVP. So if you are interested in this program, you can just let me know. I can share some more information about that. I nominated 2 MVPs. So basically just do some community contributions. I think Microsoft will assess your contribution in the past year, then you can apply for this award. There are lots of benefits of being an MVP. So let me know if you want to learn more. Cool. I think next we will invite our speaker, Wellington, who is I think the core contributor of Orchard Core CMS, right? Anyone heard about this CMS? Orchard.
Yes. Ziad, can you hear me? Actually,
yeah.
I already talked to Zoltan Leoski last year. But actually I am sort of retiring or retired. I don't work now full time. So I am a YouTube creator and I've got a few courses on Microsoft full stack of product on Udemy, actually 6 courses. And I have developed a few courses on Orchard Core. So they're actually well accepted. So I had the courage of talking to Zoltan, but I couldn't focus only on Orchard because there are so many things that people would like to get from me. And the thing is, I am now full-time grandfather, so I'm not getting much time. But I have somehow found time, and I'd like to join you, so I joined. So that's me. My name is Kaushik Roy Chaudhary, and I have also been a lecturer at AUT in computer science in Auckland University of Technology. And my background was basically in electrical engineering, but I had to shift for software engineering for the last 15 years after coming to New Zealand. So there I am. So yeah, I have talked to Zoltan, and he's my guru in Orchard Core, you can say.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, we have expert here. Yeah, thanks, Kaushik. Right? Yeah. Sorry. Kaushik. Right. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've tried it a couple of years ago. I think recently Orchard used the latest .NET Core, totally refactored, and it's quite beautiful application. And also I tried to use that, create a blog application. I found that so easy. It's just super easy. Just click next, and you can build your application very, that's super cool. Anyway, I will stop talking, and Zoltan, I'll invite you to share your screen. Thanks.
Yes, please make me a presenter, and and great to meet you, Kaushik, here as well.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yes, now I can,
you can share.
present. Oh, and by the way, Frank said that I tried Orchard several years ago for a little bit. Well, then probably I will be able to share some news. And now you should be able to see my screen as well. Okay, then let's start, because indeed, this will be about Orchard. But if you tried Orchard a few years ago, then probably it was a different Orchard, because this is now about Orchard Core. Orchard existed for years before it was Orchard 1, a .NET Framework version of Orchard. And Orchard now, Orchard Core, is built on ASP.NET Core. But even before that, I will talk about a content management system. Well, much more, but we'll focus on the content management system parts. But why would you use a CMS to begin with? Well, this is about not reinventing the wheel. So when you are starting an application, you usually have a lot of things to do that are common with other applications. Well, content management for a web, of course, user management, media management, all kinds of logging, all kinds of reporting, localization, all of this stuff that you don't need to reinvent every single time. And of course, the best is if you don't invent them at all, but rather you use an existing framework, existing solution. I mentioned framework, but a CMS is usually also kind of framework. Now, we all use .NET, of course, which is a framework in itself, but there are multiple layers on top of it, including even ASP.NET Core when we are talking about web development, that provide further guidance on how you structure, how you write your application. And the CMS can add a layer on top of that. It can make it it can provide some more guide rails on how to write your app. And last but not least, I think it's also a quite important aspect, you get a community. Of course, again, there's the .NET community, but it's a huge one. It's nice to find smaller circles like your local meetup to get to know people, be able to exchange ideas, be able to get support, and the community of the CMS can provide that. And Orchard does exactly that. This is the tagline of Orchard, so let me dissect it a little one by one. I won't read it because you can do it better. Orchard is open source. We all know open source, I would assume, but it's free. The source is out there on GitHub. You can also modify it. You can also repackage it if you intend to do that. There are very few restrictions. It's also modular. That means that while an Orchard application or an Orchard using ASP.NET Core application, to better put it, is a monolith by default, although it can also be spread out to microservices, for example. In this monolith, there's a lot of modularization. Orchard Core, for example, is made up of like 200 packages, 200 NuGet packages. You can individually decide whether to use those 200 packages or not. You can mix and match what you want to use Orchard. You can swap out built-in features, or you can just use the whole thing, what I will actually do for my demo in a few minutes. Orchard is also multi-tenant. That means that when talking about web applications, you can host multiple seemingly independent web apps, websites from the same .NET application, because the content and configuration of those tenants, as we call them, can be completely independent. They use the same code, they run from the same app, but from the outside, nobody can tell. This helps a lot with site density. This makes hosting a lot more efficient. And it's also an application framework. As I mentioned, CMSs are usually that. It's a CMS as well. And of course, it's built on ASP.NET Core. So it targets actually .NET 6 and 7 both. The idea is that Orchard always targets the latest long-term support and the latest .NET version. If those are not the same, then both. Come November, we'll have .NET 8, which will be the new long-term support version. So Orchard will target that. It's built on not just ASP.NET Core, but ASP.NET Core MVC specifically. Orchard itself follows the MVC paradigm. But by the way, in your application, you don't necessarily have to do that. While using the MVC paradigm in your own extensions to Orchard, in your own plugins, or in the application that uses Orchard is a good idea, or is a generally recommended way to do it, you don't have to. As mentioned, it's open source, of course. It's actually under the umbrella of the .NET Foundation, just as this meetup. It's a very active project, has thousands of commits, hundreds of contributors, a lot of issues as well on GitHub, but those are actually being closed. So the community implements features and fixes bugs. I already mentioned in the very beginning, but there's actually also an Orchard 1. We used to call it just Orchard CMS, and nowadays it's Orchard 1 to distinguish it from Orchard Core. It's the legacy version of Orchard, built on the legacy.NET framework, legacy ASP.NET MVC. Probably you have seen that as well, or this is when you first heard of Orchard, for those you who had. It's also a very large project. It's still actively maintained, but it's only maintained. So if there are bugs or security issues, we fix those. But for new projects, unless you have some requirement to target .NET Framework for some reason, we recommend Orchard Core. Now, Orchard 1 started very long time ago. 2009 was when it first appeared on Codeplex, which you may remember was Microsoft's GitHub before Microsoft acquired GitHub. Then in 2011 was when Orchard 1 got its 1.0, version 1.0. That's when I also started working with it. The first commits of Orchard Core were actually in 2014. If you may remember, that's when .NET Core and ASP.NET Core was also started. But because .NET Core was so turbulent at the time, so rapidly changing, we only said in 2021 that, okay, Orchard Core now is 1.0. That was at the time of .NET Core 3.1. That's when things got really stable. And I'm from a company called Lombik Technologies. We are not just working with Orchard, but we were built on top of Orchard or born out of the Orchard community. We founded our company in 2013, so a decade now. We are the biggest Orchard team in the world, and we work with companies like even Microsoft itself, or Live Nation, or the Smithsonian Institution. And it's great to be back on this meetup because I think this is now my third talk here. Previously there was a Haslier one and about
second one.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And years ago there was also I gave a talk about Haslier too. Now, why would you use Orchard as a .NET developer? Now, Orchard is built on top of ASP.NET Core and ASP.NET Core MVC. Everything you know about ASP.NET Core still applies. But with Orchard, you are kind of creating an ASP.NET Core app and adds all the goodies from Orchard in it. That means, for example, user-facing features like content management, which is provided in a very flexible and extensible way from Orchard, but I will also show you. There's also user management, everything with files, media management, mention multi-tenancy, audit trail, localization, and a lot more. I will show you. And you will also, I think, when you start working with a quality and large open source project like Orchard, you can improve a lot as a developer. This is my personal story as well. I think I really became a professional .NET developer after I joined Orchard. The code of Orchard is, I think, quite nicely written. It's maintained by some very talented people, and sometimes people who work on ASP.NET itself actually write code. And not just that, but Orchard is also used for various ASP.NET and Roslyn and or MS Build benchmarks. So the .NET team is quite familiar with Orchard. And as I mentioned in the very beginning, a CMS is not just about the software, but also about the community and about the support you get from that community. We are talking about an open source software, so that's quite important because you are not buying something from a vendor, but you are joining a community, and that not just affects your support options, but also affects where the project is headed. So Orchard is community driven. The community decides what gets to be developed next, and you, if you just start with Orchard, are part of that community as well. You can comment and vote on issues. You can take part in community meetings. You can, even if you are just beginning with Orchard, you can still steer the project. And now, a lot of talk until now. Let's see what actually Orchard is capable of. So I will now switch over to the browser and show you a couple of Orchard sites. There are actually Orchard Core and Orchard One sites mixed here, just to give you an idea of the kind of projects, kind of companies that use Orchard. This is a pretty simple website for a Transformers video game. I'm showing you because you probably know the franchise Transformers. This is a mini site for a game launch, and it's an example of how to quickly launch sites for something like a marketing campaign with Orchard, because the company that does this website or created this website and creates similar websites does that in bulk. So that's where, by the way, multi-tenancy and the framework aspects of Orchards are interesting. Some bigger names like the Royal Veterinary College in the UK also use Orchard, and this website has cats on it, actually multiple cat pictures, so by internet standards, it's a great website. But Orchard can be used for not just for like brochure-like websites, but also for more interactive web applications, including something like an air company booking app. Fly Egypt is an airline, and what you see here is, well, the booking feature of theirs. I mentioned that we work with Live Nation, we at Lombic. House of Blues is, and by the way, if you don't know, Live Nation is a huge events and concert organizing multinational Fortune 500 company. House of Blues is their brand. It's about pubs and event venues. And well, for their 50 or so venues, they use Orchard. This is, by the way, also a multi-tenant application. Local governments, municipal governments sometimes use Orchard too, like the city of Santa Monica, which is part of Greater Los Angeles. And this is, or what Santa Monica does is, I think, not just the website of theirs, but pretty much all the ways that you, as a citizen of Santa Monica, interact with the city government is now being migrated to Orchard. Not just municipal governments, but even the US federal government uses Orchard, because the Smithsonian Institution is part of the federal government. The Smithsonian Institution, if you don't know it, is the biggest museum network in the world, running some really world-class museums and related research. The Smithsonian Folkways Recordings that we see the website of is one of the divisions of the Smithsonian about music, and they are a record label, and they have a pretty complex website here, including not just simple content, but also a music catalog with a streaming feature. Now, state governments in the US use Orchard sometimes as well. The Employment Security Department of the state of Washington has an Orchard site too. And if you are interested in more, we run this orchard.com, where you can see a gallery of Orchard Core apps that we find as exemplary. The latest one is actually our website, because we just recently relaunched our website. The previous version was built on Orchard 1, and it was a decade old, so it really needed a rewrite, but we did. So the new lombic.com runs on Orchard Core. And there are a lot more sites that you can check out here. And now that I show you around in the Orchard world a little bit, let's actually run Orchard. Let's see how we work with Orchard on our local machine. What I'm switching to now is an Orchard Core solution. I have initialized it here. By the way, I use some code generation templates for it, which are documented in the Orchard documentation, and created a solution with a web app for it. So let's actually see that solution and see how an Orchard Core application looks like. And this is it. The main thing here is this web app. And you see, this is a project, and pretty much the only Orchard-specific things here are these package references. So I created an ASP.NET Core web app and added the Orchard packages to it. That's how you get all the features of Orchard. And I used this package here, which is kind of a meta package, an umbrella package. This means that I'm now including everything from Orchard. A lot of times you don't actually need that, because as I mentioned in the beginning, you can mix and match what you use from Orchard. You can just take selected packages. You don't need to use the whole thing. This project is otherwise a pretty usual ASP.NET Core app. And logging I also added. There are two other projects in this solution. One is a module and one is a theme. Both of these are kind of Orchard Core plugins. We call them extensions. Modules are usually about functionality, adding functionality, like adding features to Orchard, and more complex features. Now, themes are about the look and feel. So that's where you would put pretty much your CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. For HTML, we use either Razor templates or Liquid templates. I will show you some code as well, but before that, let me start this application. So I've hit Ctrl F5. The whole thing is now compiling, and in a second, we should be able to see the Orchard setup screen. And as Shawty mentioned, setting up Orchard is quite simple, and getting to a blog is quite simple. But we'll get into some more complex stuff a bit later as well. And this is the Orchard setup screen. Looks fairly simple enough. There's also localization here, even on the setup. And afterward, what comes is that, well, we initialize our site. Almost everything here can be changed later, a couple of things not. The name of your site can be changed, so that's just that appears on a lot of pieces of the UI, but let's call it demo. Now, a more interesting thing here is the recipe, and this is something that can be changed later. Now, a recipe in Orchard is basically a JSON file, a file that contains the content and configuration of an Orchard Core app. You can use recipes to move content and configuration between Orchard Core apps. So you can export some content, for example, from one Orchard app and import in another Orchard app. You can also use recipes for setup, as it is used here, to kind of provide site templates. These are the built-in ones, but you can also create your own. For example, if you want to create a simple blog, there's a recipe for it. That's what I will actually do. The time zone used by the app can be configured here as well. That can be changed later. And the second and last thing that can be changed later is the database engine that Orchard uses. Orchard supports these engines. For local development, we recommend SQLite because that's just a simple flat file, very simple to use. You can quickly delete it. You don't need any special server software locally. But when you're running in production, we recommend SQL Server. That includes Azure SQL as well, by the way. But use SQLite for now, and let me blow my nose just a second. I got a little bit of cold, it seems. And the next thing is what again can be changed later is creating the default admin user. So let me just create an admin here with some example details. And now this is important. For the password, we use this password usually for local development. As you can see, very secure. Of course, this is only a conventional simple demo password for demos and local development, nothing for production. And here we have our blog. As you can see, it's a simple blog with some title, and we also have a blog post here, which has a title, a subtitle, some metadata, including categorization and tagging. And if you open it, then of course it also has a body. Furthermore, we have this menu here, which apart from the home link, also contains a link to this about page, which is just a simple static page here. Now, this is how the site looks from the outside, but let's actually check out the admin area, because that's where you as an administrator interact with Orchard most. So let's see the admin, and let's log in with the same user account that we created. And this is how the Orchard admin area looks like. It's actually also responsive, and you can also collapse this menu here on the left-hand side. Furthermore, there's also a dark mode. Now, if we click the blog link here, we can check out our blog immediately. And as you can see, the blog itself also has some metadata, so we could change the name of the blog and also the description of the blog. But let me open a blog post first. So this is how our blog post looks like from the admin. And let me also open it here. Now I can see how you what is it that you edit and how it looks like on the front end. And we have our title here, the link, of course, and the body, and the rest of the stuff that the blog post has. By the way, here at the bottom, you also have a preview feature. Now, if I open it, this is the same blog post, but it's using a live preview. So if I change anything on the left-hand side here, you see that it immediately changes on the right-hand side. So this is useful to see your pages, your blog posts, or any content in the context of the application. We also have this about page here, so let's check out that. If you open content and content items, we can see the rest of the content of the app that the blog recipe created. So this is everything that the blog recipe created. There's also this about page, which, as you can see, is an article. And similarly, here's its editor. And now you may recognize some familiar things, like title and permalink. Now, let's actually go back to our blog here. Let me open it. And here's the article and the blog post side by side. Do you see the similarities? Well, of course you do. Both of them have the same kind of title, the same kind of permalink. They have a different body. So the article has something called the HTML body, and the blog post has a Markdown body. Now, what are we talking about here? Orchard has a very flexible content model, and kind of content content is kind of the central idea of a content management system. Of course, it's quite important, and Orchard provides some very well thought out model for that. Because why both of these content items here have the same title and same permalink functionality is because they use the same building blocks to provide this functionality. I use the word content item until now. I just didn't explain it. So let's get into the terminology here. What we are looking at now is an article content item. That means that this is a piece of content with the content type called article. Now, if we go to content definition, we can also see other such content types, like blog post is also a content type. A content type is kind of the blueprint of content items. Like the content type blog post describes how each blog post works and looks like. And if we scroll down, we can see those building blocks, those common building blocks, like it has a title part and it has an out part. Content parts here are the building blocks of content types. So if you want your content items to have a title, then you would create your content type and add the title content part to it. The same title part that's used across all of these. And the title part, provides some title functionality. It provides the editor for the title. It provides the display on the front end and indexing, search indexing related stuff. Similarly, outer provides the permalink functionality. So this is where the flexibility of the Orchard content model comes from. If you want to change how a blog post works, you can add new parts here, or you can remove existing parts, or you can create completely new parts from codes or from the admin as well. Shodi, you have a question.
Yeah, I do have a question because I want to understand what's the difference between the fields and paths.
Yes, and great question. I was just about to mention fields.
Yes, thanks.
But you recognize that I didn't mention them. Indeed, we also have a thing called fields here. Fields are actually included in content parts. I mean, when you add a field to a content type, you are actually adding them to a content part. So those are another layer of building blocks here. What's conceptually important here is that fields are kind of simpler building blocks. Parts always add a kind of a bigger piece of functionality, like title here. Seemingly it's a simple thing, but it does a lot of things behind the scenes. And you can only add a content part once. So a content item can only have a single title. Now fields are something simpler, and they are centered about a single piece of data. So for example, the subtitle is a text field here. And if we take a look at the blog post's editor here on the right-hand side, it's just a text field. And that's actually pretty much all about the text field, content field. It's displayed on the front end, but that's about it. You can also add multiple instances of the same type of field here. You can see, for example, there's also taxonomy field for the tags and for the category. But both of them are taxonomy fields. You can add the same type of field multiple times. You can also create your own fields, by the way. That's also available, and you can also mix and match those. So if I don't want subtitles for my blog posts, I can just remove the subtitle text field here, or add new fields. Other content items, you can see all the other content in the system. As you can see, categories, tags are actually content items as well. You can change them here too. The menu is also a content item. So what we see on the front end and the top side. And there's a lot more built-in functionality Orchard. Bill, you also have a question, please.
Okay, because I had I had some experience about using the enterprise CMS. Just wondering, when you try to add, because most of our audience are developer, so just wondering, are we able to create new content from the code?
Yes, great question, and yes. I won't show that code today, because you need to understand a couple of things from Orchard to actually understand it. But yes, everything I'm doing from the admin now, you can also do from code.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Starting with content types, actually. So the blog post content type comes from the blog recipe. In recipes, you can, as mentioned, export content and configuration. Configuration being being content types too. But usually, how we as developers do it is that we add content types from codes too. So these are things that you can also define from code. What I wanted to continue with is that there's a lot more built-in functionality in Orchard, and that a lot more built-in functionality is actually coming from modules. Modules and themes, but mostly modules. As mentioned, modules are kind of extensions of Orchard, kind of plugins of Orchard. We call them extensions in Orchard, and all of these are things that you can individually turn on or off. By default, as you can see from all these enable buttons, most of them are actually turned off. Bill, do you have another question? Just because your hand is up.
No, I don't have a question. I'll probably ask you later. Sorry, I just forgot to.
Okay, no worries. And for example, there's also media management, of course. You can upload your images, documents, videos, whatever, and include them in content items. There's also search and querying. You can, what we have by default here is just a SQL query for blog posts that lists the blog post, because you can create very limited, very constrained SQL queries from the admin here, which is to list content items. But you can, with the same search and queries feature, you can add full text search too. Orchard supports out-of-the-box Lucene search and Elasticsearch search. Lucene is more adapted for local development and simpler single server, single instance web applications. Elasticsearch is what we recommend for more complex production scenarios, where you want to keep your search index outside of the web server. That's what we also use, and that's also available as SaaS in Azure. There's also user management and role-based access control, of course. So if you check out the users list here, here's our admin user that we created from the setup screen. But of course, we can also edit it here. Well, we can edit it once we have a second user at least, because we can add new users here. And of course, registration for the public is also available. By the way, by default, Orchard uses local user accounts. That's what I demo here as well. But you can externalize both the user store and both authentication. So in the built-in functionality, external authentication is available as well. Azure Active Directory, Microsoft accounts, Twitter, Google, Facebook login are all available. There's also role-based access control. So users can have roles, and those roles can have permissions. So for example, the editor role here has only a couple of permissions, because all of these lines here are individual permissions that you can specify. For example, an editor can access the admin panel, as you can see here, but it has a lot of checkboxes. These are all effective, but yeah, for example, it can't edit content types. So this is a more restricted user role. There's also the deployment functionality, which ties into recipes. Deployment plans is about creating recipes and receiving recipes. This is how you would move content and configuration between Orchard apps. You can even import a recipe JSON directly, or upload a zip file of recipes here, or with the full deployment plans feature and with remote clients, you can even do this programmatically between two Orchard Core applications. So if you, for example, have a staging site, you can create a deployment plan to move content from it to a production site over the web without any download upload. And there's a lot more, including, for example, localization, and two things that I wanted to show you. And one of them is audit trail. Audit trail is a pretty important feature, so I figured that it's good to show it. And this is about pretty much recording everything that happens in the system. So if you want to see who changed what in Orchard, audit trail will show you. Let me configure it to record blog post events. And now, now if we go to our blog post, let me change something here. Well, let me actually publish it first, because that's the first time that audit trail recorded something from this content item since we just enabled it. And let me change the title, and let me also change the body. And let me only save a draft. This is one thing I didn't yet mention, but Orchard has a draft functionality as well. If we check out this blog post on the front end, then you can see, well, the title and the body didn't change yet. I didn't save anything, but if I save a draft, it still didn't change. Of course, because it's only a draft yet. You can have a draft version of a content item and a published version at the same time, and then you can publish it on the front end, and now it changed. This ties us into the content versioning functionality of Orchard, what audit trail allows us to see. Because when you change a content item in Orchard, when you publish or create a draft, then a new version will be created. In the audit trail, you can actually see these changes happening. First, we edited the second version of our content item. It was the second version because the initial version was created by the recipe. And then this version 3 was created when I changed the title. And finally, but that was just saving the draft. And finally, that version 3 was also published. So if you check out the details here, we will actually see what was changed. Apart from some metadata, here you can see the title being changed. And here you can see the body being changed. It is nice div view. So as mentioned, audit trail is pretty much about who changed what. This is something that you would enable on pretty much every website to see what is happening in the system. Another quite cool feature that I wanted to show you is workflows. Workflows is kind of visual programming, but to already answer the question you may have, Bill, everything you can do with workflows, you can also do from code. Rather, workflows is about extending Orchard from the admin with functionality that you may need without writing some code. Usually, we as developers would write some code for every kind of Orchard application, including extending workflows, by the way. So let me create a demo workflow here. And when you create a workflow, you get kind of a canvas where you can put activities. Every workflow starts with a task, like content published. Let me hook into the blog post content publishing event here. And then you can add tasks after this event, like you can add a notification task. As you can see, there are a couple of tasks built into. These are not all the built-in ones, by the way, because I didn't enable all the corresponding modules. And this is also extensible, so you can create your own such tasks. All the boxes that you can see here are also extensible. That's usually what we do. By the way, so even if we use workflows for some feature, we usually also add our own activities. I will just use the notify here just to show you how this works. What we'll do here is that when a blog post is published, we'll display a notification. That's it. I will take a snippet here. Yeah. You may notice that these brackets are familiar here. This is actually using the Liquid templating language. Liquid is first-class citizen in Orchard. Liquid, by the way, if you don't know, is a templating language originally started by Shopify. In Orchard, we use it for templating first, and also to provide the ability to have dynamic strings configured from the admin like this. Like in this message, we will access the ASP.NET Core user that's currently there. So now that we have the two things here on the canvas of workflows, I also connect the two and make this event the start event. So when a content is published, we'll display a notification. By the way, there are a lot more tasks. You can create, you can send out emails, you can call webhooks or start a workflow with a webhook. It's a really visual programming because you can also have loops and conditions. It's very powerful and it's very useful if you just want to quickly add some functionality to Orchard, but of course you can do all of this from code as well. So let me save this and let's see what happens when we now publish this blog post, and you can see that our message is indeed displayed. So it worked great. Workflows is quite useful, very powerful feature, but usually you would also write some code in your app, what I will do now. So let me open Visual Studio again, back to our app, and let's write a little bit of code here, because you can see that we have our theme project here, by the way, is also just a standard Razor project in this case. And it references some Orchard Core packages. These packages were added by the code generation templates as well. And now, pretty much what makes a theme is, apart from those packages, also such a manifest file with some metadata. Now, if we go to the themes functionality here, we will actually see our demo theme here. It's listed here, but it's not enabled. So what we see on the outside here is the block theme. So let's actually make our theme the current one. And now if we go back to the front end, we see that our beautiful theme is being applied. Well, it's very ugly because our theme is empty. So of course, there's no styling being applied. But by the way, you can also kind of inherit from themes. So we could say here that our theme should build on top of the block theme, and we would by default get the styling of the block theme as well. But I will just show you how you write some code, because we even have a Liquid file here. This was also generated by the code generation template for Orchard. As mentioned, we use Liquid for templating too. This is just for the demo. When we write applications that I work on, we work with the Razor templates rather. And you can see this file drives the HTML document here. So pretty much all the basic HTML elements are here. And if I add something like hello here and refresh on the left-hand side, we should be able to see it working here. So when you create a theme, it's easy as that. You write your code, you refresh, it's there. Of course, usually you would also add your own CSS. to the application, that's something that you would do in a theme too. Now, to show you some more complex code, to show you some C# code, let me also go to the full solution of Orchard, because writing some meaningful C# code here would take too much time, so I will just quickly show you how the title part works. And Bill, you have another question, please.
Yeah, just regarding the front end. So is that possible to use Vue.js or React or AngularJS to replace this thing? And also, what is your like a CSS framework to use?
So on your first questions, yes, and yes. You can use any JavaScript framework that you prefer. What you may have noticed here is that jQuery is included. This was just created by the code generation template. You don't need to use jQuery. That's just coming from the template here. By the way, as you can see on the left-hand side, now our styling is pretty much empty. This is because when it comes to Orchard's front end and also the admin area, by the way, you have complete control over what goes to the browser. So if you want to use Vue.js, you can do that. By the way, Vue.js is also one of the versions of Vue.js is also built into Orchard, and you can use it like this too. You can use Angular as well, or React, or whatever you prefer. Orchard by default, or rather the themes that Orchard provides by default use Bootstrap for the CSS framework, which also has a built-in version in Orchard. But again, you can use anything else.
Cool.
What goes to the browser is under your control.
So what about the editor mode? So is that in the editor mode, it must be used the jQuery? Is that still like responsive? Like editor mode, not front end? Yeah, this one. Okay.
Yeah. The answer here is also no. But a lot of functionality depends. A lot of built-in functionality uses jQuery. So if we go to the admin, jQuery is also included here, because jQuery, and by the way, as you can see, also Vue, is used by some of the admin functionality of Orchard. But now, in your own admin functionality, like if you create your own content part and want to use some JavaScript with it, you don't have to use jQuery.
Yeah, I do understand. But the question why I ask, because I used to like at least a 2 case study. So we use some CMS. It's easy to upgrade front end, but in back end, after 2 or 3 years, it's very hard to upgrade. Some JavaScript libraries become the legacy. Anyway, so yeah, just wondering. Cool, thanks.
These versions are coming from Orchard, so they are also updated by Orchard. The dependencies of Orchard are being kept up to date with very recent versions. So that depends on the community doing the upgrades, of course, but you can assume that these are kept up to date.
Oh, so if I would like to upgrade, for example, after a year, is that from the NuGet can upgrade, or does I have to download the new version to reinstall everything or something?
That's just NuGet, yes. So Orchard is currently on version 1.6, and as you can see from the packages of the web project, this is reflected by the NuGet references here.
Cool.
Once 1.7 comes out, you will change this and you are upgraded.
Cool, thanks.
Sometimes there are breaking changes though, so sometimes this is not enough, but you get the idea.
That could be $1 million per project to upgrade to a legacy system.
Let's hope not. I haven't seen $1 million upgrades in the Orchard world yet. There are not that many breaking changes between versions.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. What I wanted to show you is a little bit of C# codes, and I will quickly wrap up now. And this is the full solution of Orchard itself. This is what you work with if you are working in Orchard itself. Usually, if you are just consuming Orchard, then you wouldn't use it, but I still recommend you be familiar with it because there are a lot of examples. As you can see, there are 200 projects in Orchard. All of these 200 projects can provide you with some references, some examples. For example, the content management related modules are in this folder, and one of the most important ones is the title module here. That provides us the title part of course. And here we can check out how such a module project works. By the way, what makes a module is a package reference to the module target, the Orchard Core module targets package. This is a project reference here because we are in Orchard itself, and also a manifest file. Pretty much that's it. Apart from that, it's ASP.NET Core as usual. But if you are extending Orchard functionality with something like content parts, then there's some more stuff. For example, you would need a part class. So this is pretty much the root of tile part that represents tile part in code. As you can see, it stores a tile, and pretty much that's it. Of course, there's some more functionality here. For example, it also has some templates. If we go, if we open a blog post here, this here, the tile display is coming from this CSHTML file. The editor here is coming from an editor template here. And you can see that when it comes to Orchard, we are always extending something. We are plugging something into a bigger whole, and the editor of tile part is actually not a full form either. Because of that, it's just an input field and some supporting code, because the whole form for the blog post is built up from a lot of pieces. This is about extensibility. When you are creating a content part, you are creating a building block. You are creating the building block of the content item editor, for example. Then there's a lot more stuff here, including related to search indexing, as I mentioned, including the code that actually the C# code, which is kind of the code behind of the templates of the editor and the display of a tile part. So what we are seeing here is called a driver in Orchard, which is kind of a mini controller for just the content part. All of this and a lot more are explained in various tutorials. I will show you links to these too, so you can understand quite quickly how all of these come together. But some closing remarks. If you have an Orchard Core application and you want to host it somewhere, you can host it anywhere where .NET itself runs. So Orchard, just as .NET, is cross-platform, of course. We recently certified it for Red Hat Enterprise Linux too. It also runs under IaaS, so something like Azure App Services will work too. It can also be containerized, so Docker is another option. And SaaS hosting too. We have an Orchard Core SaaS called .nest, what is a multi-tenant application, by the way. There you can sign up and get your Orchard Core site up in with 2 clicks. That's of course much more limited than when you host it yourself, but it's a lot more convenient and easier too. And if you liked it, and I really hope you did, then here are some further resources. Of course, the website of Orchard would be your starting point. You can also get to the very extensive documentation there too. We also have Orchard Dojo, which is our Orchard learning and training site, which includes a tutorial series we call Dojo Course 3. That's a video tutorial with some supporting code that guides you to become an Orchard Core developer. We also have a weekly blog post series and newsletter for you to stay up to date with the Orchard world. The training demo module that I'm linking below is also a tutorial. It's a module that's completely a tutorial. It's a very thoroughly commented code that guides you to become an Orchard Core developer. It explains content part development. It explains how you would create a notification from code that we have created with workflows. It explains how to create content types, how to create background tasks, how to otherwise hook into the Orchard Core API and do a lot of stuff. And that was it for me. It's great that you already had some questions, and now probably you have time for some more. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Solan. Yeah.
Or sorry, Shodi. Yeah.
No, I think we do have the last question. Hi, Bill. Can you just?
Yeah, just a little bit hard question. Sorry. So I used to work for Cycle for 3 years and also optimized for at least 5 years, and I'm Umbraco. So if I need to convince my boss to use your CMS, so how can I convince my boss? So what is your best? Why we choose you instead of Cycle or Umbraco or other CMS?
Mm-hmm. It's I would assume you are a developer, so most of the differences comes down to what your team knows and how your team wants to run the project. Because Sitecore, I believe, is not open source or not fully open source. Umbraco, I think, is. So when it comes to the core business aspect, Umbraco and Orchard are very similar. Sitecore is not. So the first question is open source or not. This brings advantages and disadvantages. Of course, the advantage being is that you are not paying for the system, but you also don't have a kind of a vendor that you can directly go to if you need support. Well, even in an open source project like Orchard, you have companies like Lombic, but still. The second question is what you want to build and the developer team's corresponding capabilities. So you mentioned .NET CMSs, so we are starting from .NET, from a .NET development team to begin with. There's something like WordPress is out of the question. Then the question is, do you want to do ASP.NET Core? Yes, Umbraco and Orchard Core are good candidates. Do you want to extend the system a lot? I know from these systems, I know Orchard Core the most, of course, and I know that Orchard Core is very developer centric. So I mentioned a lot of flexibility in the system. Orchard is all about extending it. When you want to write a lot of code extending the built-in functionality, then Orchard is probably a good choice. But your development team has to check it out. But the feedback that we get is that the developers love Orchard. We are still talking about developers, so your boss needs to understand how your team will work with Orchard. And there's of course the built-in functionality. So all of these three systems have very different built-in functionality. They even have different concepts. They have very different UIs. But that's use case specific. So you have to compare them for the project that you want to create. Does Orchard or does Umbraco or does Sitecore have the functionality that you need? Or is it easy enough to add? Does it have all the features that you don't want to develop yourself? Does it have the extension points for the existing features that you need for that project? And longer term, it comes down. I'm a developer as well, so my viewpoint is biased there. But longer term, it also comes down to the developer experience, I think, because when we are using a CMS as a developer, built-in functionality is great, built-in everything is great, but when we are not just launching a mini site, run it for a month and that's it, but we are launching projects that will take years, or that will run for years, long-term maintainability, long-term extensibility is more important. And that's about the developer experience. So that's what your development team has to compare.
Okay, thank you very much. But I agree. So the developer experience is quite important, but the developer come and goes. So I think the long-term, like open source community supportability, maybe is more critical if you want a long-term run. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Do we have any other questions? Feel free to just turn on your microphone and ask your question. If not, I have some questions. So I saw you there's a recipe you can like create a blog or create some other websites. So my question is, if I use one recipe to create the website, then I made some changes, probably change the settings, but after that I changed to another recipe. Would be I mean, if there are any conflicts between different recipes.
A recipe is really a one-time thing. So when you are setting up a site and using a specific setup recipe, then you are initializing that site from that given recipe. But the recipe stops being interesting after that. So our application that I've created here doesn't use the blog recipe anymore. That was used to create the initial blog and blog posts and configure the application to use the blog theme. But after that, the configuration and content is now in the SQLite database, and you can change it however you like. After a setup, as we discussed, you can also import further recipes. So this is how you can move content and configuration between sites. You mentioned conflicts. Now, conflicts in this sense can be either that there's a content item with the same URL, for example, or there's configuration in the recipe that you import that already exists in the current system. Then it will overwrite it. So, for example, if you import a recipe that configures the site title for something, I use demo during the setup here, then the site title will be overwritten, which is kind of what you would expect, I believe. So you import a new site title, that will actually be applied. If you import a content item that has the same URL, actually, I'm not sure about that case. I think what will happen there is that both content items will exist, but the new content item will be accessible under the imported content item will be accessible under that URL. Because what actually identifies content items in Orchard is a GUID identifier which won't clash by all chance. Yeah, so I'm not sure about that kind of conflict.
Yeah, no worries, thanks. We have another question from the chat. Frank asked if you can talk about the Orchard multi-tenant feature. Multi-tenants, yeah.
Yeah, well, a little bit. If we have time, Orchard's multi-tenancy is something that you would turn on sorry, it's just actually called the corresponding module and feature call is called tenants. And if you enable it, you will get this tenants menu where you can create, well, tenants. By the way, this is also available via a web API. And something I didn't mention is that Orchard has a RESTful and GraphQL APIs. So everything you can click around from the admin, you can also do from an API. Well, not everything, but a lot of things from web APIs too, not just from code. And here you can create pretty much a new site, like this can be demo as well. We can use a new prefix for the URL. So when we write /demo here, we'll open that site. I'm running on localhost, so using a custom host like example.com would be complicated, so I won't do that, but in production, you can also do that. You can either select the recipe and the database here, or you can just create it and open its setup page and set it up like we did the initial in the case of the initial site. So, for example, we can create an agent, create a site with the agency recipe here, which is something that's a simple company website, like a creative agency. And if we set it up here, here we have a new site under /demo. And this is a completely different one. So it has a different admin even. As you can see, we are not logged in there because, well, it's a different tenant. So these have completely different configuration, completely different content, different user accounts and everything too. Like two completely different websites as far as users can tell from the outside. Yeah, I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, that looks cool. Any other questions from the chat? And I have another question. I saw we can upload some files like photos or images to the website. So where are they stored in the server? It's just a host stored in the current folder, or can we integrate with some other provider like storage in the cloud?
Yeah, and by default, yes, they are stored on the server. So in the app data folder, once you open our web project, we actually have a folder for each tenant under site. So a separate folder for a demo tenant I just created. And for each tenant, we also have a folder with the files. But that's just by default. And that's what we recommend for local development because, again, this is simple, just a SQLite. But we also have integration with Azure Blob Storage and also for AWS S3.
That's cool. That's my what I want to ask. Yeah, looks good. Yeah. Any other questions, everyone? Maybe I can ask another question. Maybe not very specific to Orchard. So I wonder what's the benefit of using MVC? Because I think most of the modern application I've been working recently, we just use ASP.NET Core for the backend, just develop web APIs, and front end we mainly use some JavaScript frameworks like Vue or React. But Orchard uses ASP.NET MVC, so I wonder what's the considerations behind this decision.
So I will repeat. I'm repeating this over and over, but Orchard is really extensible and it has defaults, but most of the time it doesn't force you to do anything in any specific way. And this is one of those cases as well. So how the built-in functionality of Orchard works is that it uses ASP.NET Core MVC. By the way, it also has a single-page application kind of features, but the whole thing is an MVC application. But in your own application, you don't have to follow that. That's a simple approach, but there are different operating models for an Orchard Core app. We call them the traditional CMS, the decoupled CMS, and the headless CMS. What I've shown you here is the traditional CMS. That's when, sorry, there's some noise coming from somebody.
Bill, can you mute?
Oh, really? It's me?
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's better, thank you. What I've shown you here is a traditional CMS. That means that everything is driven by the same application and everything is driven by Orchard. So the admin, the backend is Orchard, and the front end, but the public-facing part of the website is also Orchard. There's a decoupled approach. In that case, you would still have a single ASP.NET Core app. Oops. But in the web app, you would use in your own web app that includes Orchard, you would use something else than MVC. For example, you can also use MVC, but Orchard wouldn't drive the front end. It would be completely your application or your framework of choice. Similarly, you can use Razor pages for the front end. Bill, I will get to you in a minute. So that's when in the decoupled approach, Orchard provides the admin, but Orchard doesn't provide the front end. You can use some other kind of ASP.NET Core technology. And there's also the headless approach when the front end is driven by a completely different application. It can still be ASP.NET Core, but it can be, for example, a node application that interacts with the backend only via the mentioned web APIs. Or it can be not a web application at all, like a mobile app. And furthermore, you can mix and match these approaches. So you can have a front end that's driven by the same web app, but it's not driven by Orchard. And you implement it with Razor pages, but Razor pages itself is just probably a single page, and otherwise it's a single page application using JavaScript to load all the screens by interacting with Orchard's web APIs. I hope you get the idea.
Yeah, thanks. Bill?
Yeah, I just want to mention at the beginning when he shared like showing to create a recipe, they can do the headless. So the front end you can write whatever you want to write, and also why is try to separate because try to decoupling. So front end developer can work on the front end, the single page application. You can deploy separately. Yeah, it's same as like database kind of wrapper management plus backend.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. Thanks. I think that next let's just run draw because we thanks to JetBrains they provide us with a free license. So I'll share my screen. Let's run the just let's see who would be the winner. Can you see my screen, everyone?
Yeah.
So I just export the attendees list from Meetup. You may find your name on page. Let's run it. So I'll click the button and let's see who is the winner. Ravender is here. If you're here, let me know. Otherwise, we'll skip and go to next one. Okay, it's not here. No, let's do the next one. Probably. Okay, good luck. Ron, are you here?
Hey.
Yay, congratulations. Good luck.
Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, so contact me on LinkedIn. You know my name.
Yeah.
I'll send you the code. You can use it to I think just redeem for a JetBrains IDE, maybe Rider or maybe whatever you
Yeah.
want. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool.
Rider. Cool.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any other questions, everyone? Cool. I think that's today. Really appreciate Conten's presentation. And appreciate everyone for joining today's session. So I think just thank you. Kindly request everyone, if you have any feedback or any thoughts, please you can send a message on LinkedIn or share your thoughts on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever, and maybe you can add myself and .NET or use some tags just to try to advocate our community. That's us. Thanks everyone. Hope to see you next time. Thanks Conten again. Yeah, that's really great presentation. I'll probably try to use Orchard to do my blog, develop a new website. Thanks. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.